All right. Hi, welcome to Accurately Handling the Word of Truth. We're in 1 Corinthians 14, attempting to make our way through two verses, 26 and through 28. Let's dive right in. At this point, you'll notice when I read this next verse that Paul's tone has kind of changed. See, for the last 5 verses from 20 to 25, he was really arguing with the Corinthians over their messed up idea of what speaking in tongues could do. And he was not only quoting what they said, but he was giving examples of what realistically would happen. Now he's switching gears a little bit. And he's still going to be talking about speaking in tongues, but he is moving into practical applications. So let's take a look at it here. It says, "How is it then, brethren, when you come together, every one of you hath a psalm, hath a doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation, hath an interpretation. Let all things be done unto edifying." All right. Want to let you know before I dive into word by word that verses 26 through 25 are the most detailed example that we have of early Christian worship meetings. We do not have much information about what they actually did, came together. Okay. In those 9 verses there that are coming up here, we get more of a snapshot than any place else in the Scriptures. Now, chapters 11 through 14 all have to do with what they did in their public gatherings, but not specifics like these right here. How is it then, brethren? That just means what then is it is what it really literally means there. But I want to give you my definition of how is it then, brethren. It's that he wants to get at what is the upshot, what is the conclusion of these last 5 verses where you thought speaking in tongues would do this, you thought prophecy would do this, you were wrong about both of them. So what should be done instead is what he's after when he says, "How is it then, brethren?" What should be done instead? And then he goes into giving advice about what should be done. He's not asking them to tell him what should be done. He's just using a rhetorical question. He's not saying, "You guys, I don't know what to do. Please tell me what should be done." No, he's asking them, urging, inviting them to carefully consider what is to be their course of action when they have been wrong about what they were doing. See? It says, don't do what you've been doing, but here's what you should be doing. That's what "how is it then, brethren" is. The last time he called them brethren, he called them babies. Verse 20. And now he's calling them brethren again, 6 verses later, but he's calling them brethren in a more comradely way now, where he's saying, "Hey, we're all in this together. Here's what we should be doing." Now, the first word of what you should be doing is when. When you come together, It does not say if you come together. It says when you come together. If expresses uncertainty and irregularity and indefiniteness. Okay? When expresses certainty, definiteness, regularity, you can count on it. You should be doing this. Later on, in the next verse, you're going to find out that there's an if. But now, in this verse, it's when you come together. So, Hebrews chapter 13 talks about do not forsake the assembling of yourselves together, but encourage one another to come together. And when you come together, be an encouragement to one another. So apparently they had issues with attendance at times as well, even though they had some rollicking meetings, it sounds like. The next part of that is when ye come together. Now, in this verse, there are two requirements. The first one is come together. In other words, the first requirement, if you're going to be an edifying church, is show up. You got to show up. You got to show up. Okay, that seems like kindergarten, but I tell you what, you got to remember who he's writing to. He's writing to Corinthians, and they had centuries and centuries of doing things as far as what they thought was worshiping the gods, entirely different than what Paul is instituting for worshiping the one true God through Jesus Christ. So, first, you show up, come together. The word that Paul uses there in Greek, it means to journey with someone. It's not just come, sit there, coffee and a cookie, and go. But what he's talking about is that coming together is more than just simply showing up. It's a journey together with the others that show up. That is what he has in mind for fellowship, is that it's a journey together. That means you feel the bumps in the road along with the others along the way. Lots of people say, if I got to journey together with these others, I don't know. I think me and Jesus will be just fine all by ourselves. And somebody said, how can I fly with the eagles when I'm stuck here with these turkeys? That's Paul is excluding that idea. It says if you're going, the first thing you need to do is journey together with some others who are on the journey. Which is really neat, is that there's no requirement that you must have arrived. You must have arrived in to be part of us. To come together with us, you have to be one of those that's arrived. No, you just need to be heading in the right direction. Okay? Journeying in the right direction. Okay? I'm so glad for that, because I thought I was going to be a lot further along in my maturity and my relationship with Christ than I am at this age. So I'm comforted by that. We got to be heading in the same direction. The next 7 verses are practical instructions about speaking in tongues and prophesying when you come together. So it's not just the idea of speaking in tongues in your private life or prophesying to the birds, as David Brainerd used to do. He'd go out and prophesy to the animals in the woods and stuff. Well, I don't think that you can find that in scriptures anywhere, but he's talking about how do you do these two things when you're together. Paul does not provide all the instructions we would like to have about how you do tongues and prophecy when we come together. I wish he did give us all the instructions we need. Reminds me of what one of our teachers that comes and teaches here, he's written a book about the life of Paul, especially a lot of references to Luke, who wrote the book of Acts. And as he's gleaning and squeezing all the details and all the information that Luke provides in Acts, he says, I wish I could visit with Luke and say, couldn't you give us just a little bit more detail? And that's the way I feel about Paul in this section here is, Paul, couldn't you have given us not just a little bit more detail, but a lot more detail? Because there's gaps, there's blank spots that we're doing the best that we know how to fill in, but we may not be getting it right. And we'll talk more about what some of those blank spots are as we go along here. Every one of you, that's the next part of this. There is no indication as to how large a group can be and still allow for every one of you to participate. Now, that is one of the things that I wish there was more detail on. Paul does not say how large a group or how small a group. He doesn't give any indication of that. He just says, when you come together, every one of you has. In practical terms, how do you do that? That's a gap in our information. We just don't have it there. These instructions can more easily be carried out in a smaller group. Okay? Weekly attendance at a megachurch is probably not the best setting for every one of you to have a psalm, a doctrine, a revelation. Priority needs to be given to settings where each person has two things. They've got the safety and they've got an easy opportunity to participate. Easy opportunity is really, really important. Okay? Lots of places say, well, sure, I guess if you really wanted to, you could, but they don't make it easy. They don't make it easy at all. It's like overcoming, well, I don't want to get, you got to overcome a lot. You got to be pretty brazen if you're going to do that. So, but the thing is that in another place in Ephesians 4:16, Paul says that the church cannot be edified unless there is the effectual working in the measure of every part. Of every part. So this is not the only place that talks about this every one of you has type of thing, because he talks about that in other places too, how important it is that there be a working, contributing, participating by every part. That's what makes edification of the church. Anyway. Every one of you, the Greek is an interesting word there. It means each one considered individually. So when it says every one of you, it's not talking about you all. It's talking about you individually. Every one of you. Hath, hath is a big word there. The second requirement, this is the second requirement in this verse. The first one is show up. The next one is every one of you has. That's the second requirement in this verse. Hath, as we say has, okay, I'm just using the King James, and to be consistent, I keep on using it along the way here. But has in Greek actually means possessing. You can see it up in there, possessing the means to accomplish the task. Wow, when I saw that, I thought, man, I got to think about that one. Has, H-A-S, has that big a meaning. It's possessing. If you have, it means you possess the means to accomplish the task. Has can mean a lot of things in different contexts, but that's what it means in this context here. Is Paul is saying you individually possess the means by which to accomplish the task. Now the question is two things. What are the means and what is the task? Those are the two big things there that Paul needs us to take a look at. He uses has 5 times. Did you notice in this verse that he says has 5 times in this? He's deliberately redundant. Over and over again, he does it. He says has. Each one of you has a doctrine. Each one of you has a revelation. Each one of you has a psalm, and on along the way. So the means by which to get the task done, let's first of all take the task. The task is seen at the end of this verse. Instead of putting the task at the beginning, he puts it at the end. Every one of you has the means to do all things unto edifying. Because that's what it says at the end of the verse. Let all things be done unto edifying. And you have the means to edify. And what are the means? He lists 5 of them. Psalms, doctrine, tongues, revelation, interpretation. Those are 5 means to accomplish edification, to edify the church, to edify those that you are speaking to and journeying with along the way. So, not everyone must give a psalm, a doctrine, etc. These 5 things. But everyone has the ability to edify the gathering by one means or another. Do you think for just any time at all that those 5 are all the only means by which you could edify the gathering? Absolutely not. This is, we'll talk about it later, just a few minutes here, but this is not an exhaustive list. I tell you, edification, if you come together, the group will be edified when every one of you is ready, willing, and able to edify. It just will naturally happen. You won't have to even try. But if you're ready, willing, and able, and you possess some means to do it with, the body will be edified. Okay. Everybody that comes together must be prepared to speak or be silent as the Holy Spirit brings thoughts to their minds. Okay? You may have a whole bunch of things to say. How many of you had this thing where it says, shh, no, just don't say anything. It'll keep. Because not only are we urged to speak, or in the case of this list that we've got here, Psalms as well, but we're also urged to be silent. In the next four verses, we're urged to speak just as many times as we're urged to not speak. Verse 27, if a man speak. And verse 28, let him keep silence. Verse 29, let the prophets speak. Verse 30, let the first hold his peace. Long King James way of saying, don't say anything along the way. Psalms, doctrine, hath a tongue, hath a revelation, hath interpretation. You possess the means. These are 5 possible ways to edify. It's not a hierarchy. I tell you what, there is such, especially among scholars, all these, there's many lists in the New Testament, many lists of manifestations of the Spirit, many lists of individuals, many lists of sins, many lists of virtues, all these lists, and scholars especially. I don't know if it has to do with administrators too, but they just can't help but put these lists into a hierarchy. Boop, 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 boop. This is first, this is second, this is third, whether it be in importance, whether it be in the time they occur, whether they be in location or anything, but they just want so badly to order these lists. And the fact is that Paul just does these random lists. It's not that he's not caring about what he says. It's just that he says, it's kind of like, well, okay, Psalms, doctrines, tongues, revelation, interpretation, etc., etc., etc. There could be an etc. on the end of this list especially. And etc. means more of the same sort. And he could have gone on and on about all the means by which you possess in order to edify. But he just gives 5 and says, I could go on, but I'm not going to. It's not a hierarchy. It's just a short, random, representative sample. Etc. could have been added to the end really well, but of course in Greek there's no etc. Etc. is Latin. Okay, so all these activities, I want you to notice that all of these activities that he has here, and if you look at the 9 gifts of the Spirit as well, almost every one of them as well, and the list in Romans 12, about half of that list, but this list especially, every single one of those is 2 things. It's verbal, it's done verbally, and it's done publicly. Okay. So if you're going to edify the church by these means and many other means that could have been listed, 2 things you need to do. You need to overcome your fear of public speaking. Okay. As you know, as well as I do, that fear of public speaking is right up there amongst the phobias that more people have than any other. the thing about it is that Paul, he doesn't say, I'm sorry, you can't. He just says, every one of you possesses. Every one of you possesses the means to edify by speaking publicly. Or, if you're doing Psalms, singing publicly. Okay? So that's the one thing that needs to be done. Perfect love casts out fear, John says. Well, I guess and then it goes on to say, he that feareth is not perfect in love. Well, I'm first to say I'm not perfect in love because I after all the practice I've had, I still am afraid of public speaking. But I overcome it because I love something more than I hate public speaking or fear public speaking. The second thing that a person needs to do if they're going to edify, if they're going to do all things to edifying, is they need to gain an accurate understanding of the scriptures that seem to prohibit public speaking. Okay? There are a number of scriptures that seem to prohibit certain people from speaking in public. I've done a study of 3 different passages of scripture that are traditionally interpreted to mean that there are certain people groups that cannot speak in public. Okay, I've tried to gain an accurate understanding of what each one of those is something that Paul said. I want to know number one, what he really said. So I need to get original language on those things instead of translation after translation after translation. And then the other thing is, what did he intend by saying that? Okay. Now, another thing that you should note, not only is it verbal and it's public, but note the absence of activities that are considered indispensable in most churches. There is no designated priests. There is no worship leaders mentioned. There is no reading of scriptures mentioned. There's no preacher. There's no order of service. Those things that we would think are, we can't even have a meeting if we don't have these things. He doesn't even mention them. That's something to really ponder there. Then he gives this list of psalms, doctrines, tongues, revelations, interpretation. All of those except psalms I have dealt with in other places in this study, and I'm not going to mention anymore. But psalms has an interesting thing. As you notice, I got a few typos in here. I'm noticing them right now along the way. Psalm means literally to pluck the string. Not luck the string, but pluck the string or play an instrument. Obviously, I was not hitting the P on my keyboard very hard. Okay, so anyway, that's not necessary for you to know. Okay, to play a stringed instrument accompanied by singing, right? We got that. But there's 2 other things that are involved in Psalms that you got to go to Colossians 3:16 to find out, is that if you do Psalms, you also can teach, which means give instruction, and admonish. Admonish means to warn gently. In Psalms, by plucking the strings and singing along with them, that does not always have to be praise to God. It can give instruction to the rest of the hearers, and it can also gently warn the hearers. That's what it says. It says, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms. Okay, go on there. That all things be done unto edifying. This is the one guiding principle that controls all decisions that are made when we come together. This is it. It's got to fall under that principle there. Paul is, you probably already noticed this if you've been interested in anything, is that Paul will answer specific questions not by giving a specific answer, which is really frustrating for me in this section, because he doesn't give specifics. He doesn't give specific instructions. You know what Paul typically does? He answers a specific question with a general principle, a general kingdom law. He will answer their specific, what should I do in the case of this? And his answer, like Jesus so many times, he wouldn't give a direct answer to that question. He would instead point out and elaborate on a kingdom principle, a law of the kingdom, and we're supposed to fit our specific situation into that general, overriding, overshadowing principle along the way. And that's what is done here, is that we're just asking for more and more details about what should I do with this? What should I do when that? How about this person? What about that thing? And all those things. And he gives a general guiding principle. The question that needs to be asked is not what does it specific, where is my list of instructions, but the question is, does this edify everyone that's come together, those that I am journeying with? Will this thing that I'm considering doing, saying, singing, appearing as, whatever, does it edify? Well, okay, we'll get to what edify means here in just a second. I've said it before, but I'm going to ride that hobby horse again because it needs to be ridden. Let all things be done unto edifying, okay? Let means to bring to pass or make to happen or make it happen. You make it happen. Okay. That doesn't sound very Christian. That doesn't sound very spiritual, does it? He says let. I think he probably says let 10 times in this little section. Let. And let means make it happen. You make it happen. But of course, we understand that Jesus says, without me, you can do nothing. So, combining these two paradoxes that Paul is saying, you make this happen. Let all things be done unto edifying. Make edification happen. You do that. There's no room for passivity. There's no room left in let for in non-participation. But Paul says the combination of these two things. One says, you make it happen. The other says, you can do nothing without Jesus. Paul puts the two together in 1 Corinthians 3:9. He says, we are laborers together with God. He brings them both together in one phrase. Let all things be done. And in this case, there's not so much doing as there is speaking in that list that's given. Let all things be said unto edification, but also let all things be done unto edification as well. This goes all the way down to your appearance. All right? Let all things be done unto, and that word is loaded with meaning too. Unto means motion in the direction of. It has to do with what we were talking about, journeying together with. I'm heading in the right direction. And edification needs to be headed in the direction of edification. Unto edification. Encouraging each other to keep moving in the direction of Christ. Okay? It's not... and again, I got to say it, there's this peer pressure and there's this religious spirit that we all come in contact with that says, you can't be one of us unless you've arrived. You can't be one of us. You can't really be in fellowship here unless you are farther along than you really are. And yet, 2 times within where he's saying, just be moving in the right direction. Just be moving toward Christ. Encourage one another. Urge one another to do this. And edifying, my definition of edifying, and I haven't changed this as I've looked at it over the years, is the 3 C's. Edification is the 3 C's. Close, continuous, clean relationship with Christ. Close, continuous, and clean relationship. And I got this from Jesus' remark that he is the vine and we are branches that have been grafted into him. And grafting will not succeed and will not produce fruit unless it's close, continuous, and clean. That's what edification really is. Edification is not feeling better about yourself. That's what most people expect when they come to church. I need to be edified. I need to feel better than I do. And that's not what it means. Close, continuous, and clean connection with Christ. It's the C's. 27 is the next verse along the way. If any man speak in an unknown tongue, let it be by 2 or at the most by 3, and that by course, and let one interpret. Man, is this ever full of gaps and blank spots. Enough to give you the twitches along the way. Of all the possible things that are to be done unto edifying, Paul focuses again on the problem child of them all, speaking in tongues. Paul spends 33 of the 40 verses, 33 verses out of 40 verses in chapter 14 talking about the proper use of speaking in tongues. This was the problem that Paul was not going to. He probably spends a little bit more time on the resurrection from the dead than he does on this issue of correcting speaking in tongues, but not by much. Not by much. Okay. That's how important this was to him. Again, it goes back to the last 5 verses that we studied. They thought tongues were for a certain purpose. Paul says you're dead wrong. If you try that, it will be disastrous. And now he's back at tongues again. Only this time practical limitations and requirements. If, here's that if. Remember the last time we were looking at the verse in 26, it's when you come together, definitely this is a must. This you must be doing regularly, definitely, and continually along the way. Now he says, if, not when any man speaks in an unknown tongue, but if any man speak in an unknown tongue, that means it's not certain and it's not definite that any man is going to speak in tongues. Right there. Something that needs to be pointed out. It's right there in the scriptures. Okay. It can be an edifying meeting without addressing the congregation by speaking out loud in tongues. It's well within possibilities to do that. Going on, any man speaks in an unknown tongue. If any man speaks in an unknown tongue. I have to say it, unknown is not in the original scriptures. The word unknown. I feel a rant coming on. I'm not going to do it. Just ignore unknown. It's just not in there. If any man speak in a tongue. Paul assumes that there is also an accompanying interpretation of tongues, okay? Now, that's just common sense in this spot. If any man speak, he's already addressed the fact of people speaking in tongues without an interpretation. He says it just creates confusion and it gives the wrong impression about who Jesus Christ is when you do that. Let it be by two or at the most three. Okay, let it be by two or at the most three. Apparently, and now we don't have the problem if they did, okay, is that apparently they were trying to avoid tongues and interpretation of tongues from dominating the meeting. Okay. You got to realize that in their pagan religions, it was common for ecstatic speaking in tongues and processions and dances and waving of cloths and robes and all those things were common to them. They could dominate for hours and hours, and they would, in fact. Some of these cults would go into frenzies, go into ecstatic. They would blow a fuse and they loved it because it was one place within their culture that they could let loose. So everybody was a convert. They could let loose without having to pay some consequence for it because it was unto a God. Okay, so they two or three, at the most three, and that by course. My goodness sakes, that just means take turns. And those two or three got to take turns. Duh. I mean, who doesn't know that? That's something that you learn in preschool. No, we got to take turns now. Stuff like that. You got to know who Paul was talking to. I like to look into first century Greek culture, Greek Roman culture, and there was a historian. He wasn't a Christian, but he lived at the same time that Paul did. And he was also in Corinth. And he wrote journals. He wrote journal after journal after journal, essays upon essays. He was a professional writer and a professional speaker. His name was Deo Chrysostom. Chrysostom, Deo Chrysostom. He just lived during that same period of time. He was a contemporary of Paul at the time that Paul was in Corinth. Here's what he said about the Corinthian teachers and city leaders. This is an objective. This guy didn't have any skin in the game. He was from a Roman province that's now part of Turkey, but he got kicked out of his hometown because he said something against the emperor, and so he wandered all over the known Mediterranean at the time, and he would write these journals and he would sell them and speak in public squares and things like that. He said that the church leaders and teachers in Corinth routinely were shouting and abusing one another, engaged in invective. Do you know what invective is? It means violent verbal attacks against each other in order to demonstrate to the crowd. So this is all in public. This is all made sure it's in the public. To demonstrate to the crowd how inferior their competitors were. That's the example that these Corinthian Christians had as to how to behave in a public gathering. That's their example, and they'd had that example for hundreds, even thousands of years. They were aggressive. They were really aggressive. To this day, you go to Italy, you go to Greece, you go to any of those areas down there, and then you go into the Middle East and down into Northeast Africa and everything, and you'll see the same thing. They are in your face all the time. They are loud. They never listen to each other. They just talk. They yell. They scream. They insist upon being heard, and consequently, nobody gets heard. That's the people Paul was talking to when he says, now you need to take turns. They needed to hear that. Because if they didn't have that rule, the scene that we read about in verse 23 is what happens. Where they were all talking in tongues at the top of their lungs, vying for attention. And the people coming in just says, oh, this is just like our pagan. This is just, Jesus must be another pagan god. Because this is what we do all the time. It says, no, it shall not be so among you. It shall not be so among you. All right. And let one interpret. Now this is just thorny as all get out. Chapter 14, verse 5 and verse 13, if you were to take the time to look at it right now, says that the tongues speaker is responsible for the interpretation. Okay? Verse 5 and verse 13 say that pretty clearly. However, chapter 12, verse 10, and chapter 14, verse 28 indicate strongly that the interpretation is given to someone else. So what does it mean, let one interpret? You got two verses that say the one who spoke needs to interpret. Two verses that say someone else will interpret. There is no guidance that is written in our scriptures about that. It's just the basic guiding principle. What will edify this gathering? Here's this next idea. When there is an utterance in tongues. Now, here's the thing that I want to point out real carefully here to you. It's time to point this out. What we're talking about here, what Paul is talking about where he says there must be an interpretation, here is my best understanding of what he means. Let him that speaketh in an unknown tongue pray that he may interpret. Okay, that's verse 15 of chapter 14. Okay, that he that speaks in a tongue means that it's an utterance in tongues that is intended to draw the attention of the entire group. Okay? We'll get to this part where it says, if there's no interpreter, let him keep silent. We'll talk about that in just a minute here. If the clock is getting me again. Okay, but when my best understanding of what Paul really was talking about here, because there's so many things that he doesn't give us enough detail about, but he's talking about someone who speaks out loud in tongues intending to draw the attention of the entire group to it. Not for attention-getting purposes, but he or she is intending to get the attention of the whole group to attend to this. Okay? When somebody does that in a public gathering, they must, I should say they, because two say they must, two say someone else must, but somebody must interpret that because it was intended for everybody was there. It wasn't intended to be spoken simply unto God. It was intended to be spoken not only to God, but to the people that were there as well. That must be interpreted. That's my best understanding at this point. That does not mean, and we've had ongoing discussions and writings and other people studying this thing and discussing it along the way, that when the intention of the speaker is to get everybody in the group to attend to their speaking, then there must be an interpretation. Whether it is they or whether it is somebody else. The speaker must do this. If they intend for everybody to attend to what they're saying, pay attention to what they're saying, they have to be praying, desiring to interpret, and pray to interpret beforehand. Okay. Let him pray that he may interpret. I believe that that's something that they need to do beforehand. It's not, I'm going to speak out in tongues, then I'm going to go, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord, oh Lord. No, this is something that they're doing ahead of time because there's a desire that's welling up from that well deep within them that says, this is something that needs to be done to edify the church. Number two, they have to arrange beforehand with somebody who is able and willing to interpret what they spoke. Okay? Someone else. Or the third option is they have faith that the Holy Spirit will provide. Now, my opinion is that there's many people that say, that's the one that I believe in. That's it right there. I've got faith that the Holy Spirit will provide. Well, I tell you, The Holy Spirit has already given us clues along in the scriptures that says you need to be praying about this beforehand, or you need to be arranging and collaborating with somebody else to make sure that this happens, because it will not be edifying. You'll have verse 23 all over again if you don't take these proper steps beforehand along the way. So faith, define faith, okay? You know, you say you have faith without doing any preparation. I'll show you my faith by my preparation. Okay. All right. Okay. Paul does not say which one he had in mind of those three options. Okay? He just says there must be an interpretation. The word one is a very tricky word here. One can mean one in contrast to many. Okay, let one interpret is what it says. Let one. Okay, so one instead of let many interpret, the rule is let one interpret. Just one out of many. One out of many. One can also mean a certain one. Let a certain person or someone interpret. Let someone interpret. And one can also mean each one. And when you have each one interprets, you've got anyone. Okay. So he doesn't say. It could mean any of those along the way. Couldn't you just give us a little more detail, Paul? It would really be nice, and it would stop some of the myths about this particular activity if we had it. It could mean there should be only one interpreter for all of the tongues that are spoken out loud, 2 or 3 of them, right? So 2 or 3 tongues are spoken, and that only one person should interpret all 3 of them. That could mean what it means. It also could mean there can only be one interpreter for each message in tongues. One message in tongue, one interpreter. 2 messages in tongue, second message in tongue, a second interpreter. Third message in tongues, a third interpreter. So it could mean that too. He just doesn't say. What is unto edifying? Interpret is the last word. Let one interpret. Do you know that Paul never tells us what the content of an interpretation is? He says, you got to have an interpretation. If somebody intends to get the whole attention of the whole group, you got to have an interpretation. And never once does he hardly give a hint as to what specifically is said when you interpret. He just gives general characteristics, and this is typical Paul, to give you a general principle, and you fit your particular circumstance into that. Chapter 12, verse 7 says it meets the need of a particular circumstance. So interpretation needs to meet the need of a particular circumstance. That's what profit with all means in 12:7. It says that the manifestation of the Spirit is to profit with all, to meet the need of a particular circumstance. Therefore, I have to honestly be frank with you, these interpretations and these interpretations that say, "Yea, my child, I am pleased with you. That could meet a particular, that could meet a particular need, but it's not very particular. It could be somebody's particular need, but so we got to give each other room on these things. But that's pretty thin content for profit withal. 14:5 and 13 and 26 says that it must edify the church. So there you go. Whatever content, whatever is said in interpretation, it must encourage, urge, and call people to a what? The 3 C's. A close, continuous, and clean connection with Christ. 14, 7, 8, 9, 11, 14, and 16 interpretation must make unintelligible language easy to understand. Simple as that. It's got to do that. Preaching, prophesying, teaching, and exhorting, and encouraging and testifying. And you could go on. I put etc. there. Means more of the same sort. All those things that we are very familiar with in our church gatherings all fulfill the general characteristics of interpretation of tongues. Did you ever think about that? That all these things that we do are the general characteristic of interpretation? So who is to say, as Rocky Coffin would say, and the answer to that is nobody can say that the sermon that comes later wasn't providentially arranged to be the interpretation of what somebody spoke in tongues. Or an exhortation, or the testimony of somebody at open mic, okay? Or somebody getting up and saying, man, this scripture was really impressed on me. I'm going to read it to you. On and on. Those all fulfill those 3 basic general characteristics. There's no indication that when you sing in tongues that it must be followed by a specific kind of interpretation. There's just nothing said about it. Paul says, I sing in the Spirit. I sing in tongues. Never does he say, and that must be interpreted. Okay. That's to himself and to God, okay, which we're going to get to. But if there be no interpreter, I got to stop right there at verse 28. Thanks for listening, and we'll take up on verse